Welcome, everybody, to the X Factor podcast. Today we have a good episode set up for y'all here on this Tuesday afternoon, morning, wherever you all are at. Remember to follow the TikTok and Twitter. I usually have it in the description below. Or I'll just tell you here, X Factor Sports 420, that is the TikTok. And then X Factor Sports on Twitter with two S's at the end. It'll be the same logo as my YouTube podcast show. So we're gonna talk about some college football that happened over the weekend. We have a couple games I'm gonna talk about here. Mainly the top 25 games. I wasn't able to really catch on a lot of other stuff that happened. But we're gonna start with UCF and Oklahoma to start this, week of last week of chaos. If I think that's pretty much the word to put it. Because last week there was a lot of crazy stuff between referees, bad calls, which I will get into in a little bit. Some strange football happening, some strange almost upsets that happened. And one of the almost upsets happened was UCF, who started the year 3-0, go into Oklahoma and almost beat.
Fashion, beauty, hairstyles, Skittles.
These targeted ads are getting really creepy.
It's almost like
That was not planned at all. That was not planned whatsoever. So, in UCF, who is currently 3-4, they were 3-0, went into Oklahoma. They gave Oklahoma one hell of a fight for this game. Oklahoma, they had their good win against Texas a couple weeks ago. Coming to this, very shocking start. Oklahoma scored. Dillon Gabriel to Nick Anderson, 29-yard touchdown. Went up 7-0. Next thing you know, John Plumlee runs it in for a touchdown, gets the goal. Then you get a field goal, so you're down 10-7. And then, of course, Dillon Gabriel again to Nick Anderson to make it 13-10. UCF goes in, make it 16-14 or 17-14. So then 17-17. Next thing you know, UCF takes the lead again. Now it's 23-17. And then, Oklahoma just took out the fourth quarter with two scores, two touchdowns. UCF tried to come back. They tried to get a 2-point conversion after their 12-yard touchdown. And they went to go for a 2-point conversion and missed it. In my opinion, the 2-point conversion was a very bad read. There was no blockers right where he threw the running back to, or the quarterback threw the running to. So that was a very awful end for the UCF, as John Plumlee was 16 for 30. He had 248 yards and 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, a long of 86. Rushing game, I feel like they did pretty all right. R.J. Harvey, he had 23 carries, 101 yards. Xavier Townsend had 2 carries for 38. Johnny Richardson, 6 for 15, and all right for that. In total, they had 41 carries for 149 yards. So, I wouldn't say it's a very dominant showing for the running game, but it's a pretty decent showing for what they showed up against UCF. Receiving, Javon Baker, 5 catches, 134 yards. Pretty solid game if you ask me for that. He was the one who had the long 86-yard reception. He also had 2 touchdowns. Randy Pittman Jr. Had 2 catches for 50. Xavier Townsend had 5 catches for 33. And then Kobe Hudson with 1 for 23. A lot of other stuff was just sitting there and then nothing. So 16 catches through this wide receiver core. 2 touchdowns. Obviously, that's the only 2 touchdowns that they got through the game. For the passing game, they punted 7 times. for 273 yards. Defensively, Lee Hunter and Trevon Morris-Brash both got a sack. Malachi Lawrence both also had a sack so they had 3 sacks in the game, 5 TFLs and an interception coming from Quadric Bullard. First thoughts that coming through this game, I feel like Oklahoma. If I was Texas, I would be very disappointed on what happened through this Oklahoma game, because Oklahoma, they went into the Red River Showdown. They beat Texas, and they're flying high and dry, and then they barely squat one off UCF. I think the only thing that's really I guess a positive of UCF was 3-0 at the time, but they're on a 4-game losing streak. So it's really hard to really put that how do I put it? It's really hard to get through. See, what would you think of Oklahoma now? You know what I mean? Because of what has expired over the last couple of weeks. Because Oklahoma is, in my opinion, one of the clear-cut best teams in college football. And then of course UCF came in and legit almost beat them. Because UCF, they started the year, they beat Kent State 56-6. Then they barely swapped one off Boise State, which I watched that game. Which was a pretty fun ending to that, 18-16. Then they beat Villanova, my bad, 48-14. And then they lose a tough one to Kansas State. And then they lose one to Baylor, that was a very entertaining game by Baylor and UCF. Then they lose big to Kansas 51-22, and then of course they lose this. So the start of the year they look good. 56-6, 18-16, 48-14. So they're looking high and dry, and then Kansas State, Baylor, Kansas, Oklahoma. So they had to see some of these bigger college teams, and they just kind of crumbled. They have West Virginia left on the schedule, which I could see a pretty good game coming from that. Cincinnati, I think they could probably beat Cincinnati way as Cincinnati's been playing. Oklahoma State, I think they probably lose to Oklahoma State. They probably lose to Texas State, and I think Houston could probably get a good one off of them to end the season for UCF. The Oklahoma Sooners side of things. Dylan Gabriel, I think he had a very solid game. He was 25 for 38, 3 touchdowns, 253 in yards, had an interception, but I thought he had a very productive game. Nick Anderson is was one of his main targets with 5 catches, 105 yards, a very good showing from him. Drake Stoops, 7 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, so he had a very predominant game too, getting a lot of catches getting in there. The rushing game, 46 carries, 189 yards throughout the whole, everyone that did get a rush. Marcus Major, though, the leading rusher with attempts, 18 for 82, so not a very, not a good, but not a bad, it's like in the middle, decent type of game. And then Gavin Schwach got 10 carries, 63 yards. I think that'd be a pretty good showing. He also had a touchdown. Dylan Gabriel also had 10 rushes with 22 yards. A lot of it has to be about running around and pretty much trying not to get yourself sacked. Defensively, they had 3 sacks. Jordan Kelly, Ethan Downs, and Peyton Bowen all 3 had sacks. They had 8 TFLs and a forced fumble, but they don't have any recoveries from that, and that was from Danny Stutzman. Oklahoma, I still feel very strong about Oklahoma. Despite barely knocking one off on UCF, because how UCF has really showed they can really put up some games against some of these bigger college teams. And if you look at Oklahoma's schedule, and if you look at the teams that they've played, They beat Arkansas State 73-0. They go into SMU, they win 28-11. They go into Tulsa, win 66-7. They beat Cincinnati 26. They beat Iowa State 50-20. And, of course, the Red River Showdown, one of my favorite college tradition games throughout the season. Coming in and beating Texas. And barely getting one off of UCF. They play Kansas on the 28th this weekend. So that's a game that I expect Oklahoma to probably sweep through. Oklahoma State probably gives them a fight, but I still think Oklahoma comes out with the win. They face West Virginia. I think Oklahoma takes a spot there. They play BYU. I think they get one there, and then I think they beat TCU. So they have a good shot on making the college football playoff. But with their final couple games scheduled, you never know. Kansas, Oklahoma State, or West Virginia can just sum up and take it from. BYU can somehow just take it. It's college football. You never know. We've had some shocking things happening throughout college football over the last ever. Like anything can happen in college football. So that's something to really look forward to. Another game we're going to get going on here. Probably the biggest upset of the college football season as of right now is Virginia beating North Carolina State. Or no, not North Carolina State. North Carolina. North Carolina, easily one of the best teams in college football, had one of the best quarterbacks in Drake May. And they somehow lose. I don't know how you just lose that. My computer is being very slow right now, so I'm trying to... There. I'm trying to get my notes up. I don't have them all... I don't usually have them printed, so they're usually on my computer, so that one is on me. So yeah, at the time 1-5 Virginia goes into North Carolina. They were 6-0. They were ranked 7th. I think they were ranked 7th or 6th at the time. Virginia obviously has not had the best year when it comes to college football. They are currently now on a 2-game winning streak. They lost to Boston College. They lost to North Carolina State. They lost to Maryland. They lost to James Madison, which James Madison is now ranked, which is a very big thing to see in James Madison ranked on how small the school is. They got whooped by Tennessee. So right now it's a not very good time to be a Virginia fan. But the last 2 weeks has been a very good time. Tony Muskett had 20 for 30, 208 yards and a touchdown. Malik Washington, 12 catches, 115 yards and a touchdown. Sackett Wood Jr., 3 catches for 62 yards. Everyone else got combined with one with either 13 yards or down to 2 yards. The rushing game, 52 carries for 228 yards. You had 4 people go over 10 carries on rushing, and Pierce Jones, Mike Collins, Tony Muskett, and Kobe Pace. Jones and Hollins both had similarity, 14 carries to 15 carries, 67 yards to 66 yards, so very similar stat line. Hollins had 3 touchdowns on the running game. You really noticed the defense. They had 2 sacks, 2 TFLs, an interception. They were able to get something on Drake May. And then obviously you look at the North Carolina side of things. Drake May, 24 for 48. Not a very good stat line when it comes to completions. 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. Devontae Walker got 11 catches for 146 and a touchdown. Bryson Nesbitt, 3 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown. Omaron Hampton had 19 for 112, leading the team in the rushing game. I feel like that this game was a very, you were always talking about who's the best quarterback coming into this draft, and when it's always Drake May always has to be in that conversation. But then after what happened today or the other day, man, I don't know if you can really say because Virginia scored a touchdown with about 8 minutes left. They had 8 minutes to go down and score. They didn't score at all, any points, and it's like how you're one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and you're out there and you lose to a team that's 1-5, and that was 0-5 the week before they got their first win. I really don't know what to say right now about North Carolina. I do still think that Drake May is still one of the better quarterbacks in college football. There's no doubt about that. The only thing is, does that change his stock in the draft? It could, just by a little, probably not a lot. Because if you look at their full season so far, they lost to Virginia, I think, and they beat Miami 41-31. They whooped Syracuse 47. They beat Pittsburgh 41-24. They whipped Minnesota 31-13. They beat Appalachian State by 7 or by 6 in overtime. They whooped up on South Carolina. They lost. That was last year. My bad. So they've been able to cruise through some of these wins. There's been some where they've been in a fight, like with Appalachian State. They had to fight one through. Miami, they had to fight one just for a little bit, and then they got the win. And then Virginia, of course, another fight win. They play Georgia Tech next week. I do believe they're going to easily get that one. They face Campbell, which is a smaller school. I believe they get the win there. I feel like the real test will be when they have to play Duke on November 11th, when they're now they're ranked 20th, and Duke just come off a loss to Florida State. So that is something to really look forward to. Talk about Alabama for a second. Alabama, I always seem like I always have to talk about this team because it's been one of my main focuses all year. Because I feel like that this team is one of their worst teams, and the weird thing is they're still 7-1. They're still able to get in here and they're still able to win. But I'm going to talk about Tennessee right now. Tennessee, they had a good through the first parts of the weeks of the season. They've been able to get to these teams and whoop them and beat them down, and then they play their first ranked team in Alabama, and they pretty much choke the bed. They don't really do much. They started out, they were 20-7 at halftime. Alabama comes back, third, boom, scores 17 points in the third, and then next thing you know, boom, fumble recovery, Alabama scores another touchdown, and that's pretty much the end of the game. So it's not as entertaining as last year's game, and easily one of the best college football games I have ever seen in my life. But one thing is, I gotta talk about Alabama. Alabama, they're always, Nick Saban always has something going for Alabama. And could they potentially make the playoffs with how this team is going and how this team is, could they potentially go in and make the playoffs? There's a real big shot where we could see Alabama back to the playoffs this season. They play LSU. They still have to play Kentucky. They still got to play Auburn. And they still got to play. They're on a bye week this week, but they got LSU, which LSU is one hell of a team. LSU, oh my God, is one hell of a team. That could be a game where they could potentially lose. And I said that about I think it was Texas A&M, and they ended up coming out and winning. I also said that about Tennessee. But LSU, the way they're playing lately, they could definitely come in and probably whoop on something. I don't think Alabama loses to Kentucky. They play Chattanooga on November 18th, so I think they're just going to whoop on them. If you notice this year, they have really not played anyone. They've played teams that are really known to somewhat known schools. They played Middle Tennessee. Not many people know them. I know them from watching some of their games in the past. 56-7, they whoop on them. Their biggest win of the year so far. Then they lose to Texas, of course. Then South Florida. If you don't know South Florida, then I don't really know what to tell you there. They barely sweep one out on South Florida. They go on and they face Ole Miss. Offense didn't play well. They go on and they face Mississippi State. Boom, they whoop up on Mississippi State. They go over and play Texas A&M. And that game was just this is probably one of their toughest games or toughest wins that they've had this year so far. And then of course they go on to face Arkansas, where their offense struggled again. And then boom, they come on and they face Tennessee and whoop up on Tennessee and come back in the second half. And they're probably one of the better second half teams in college football. All I gotta say is LSU is not gonna let them get slipped. And one thing Alabama also knows how to do is score on big plays. They know how to do that. And if LSU is gonna lose this game, it's gonna be because of that right there. It's gonna be because of Jalen Milroe throwing some big bombs downfield, and it's really gonna screw up that pretty much the whole game right there. So, like I said, it's very interesting watching Alabama this year because they're still in it. They still have one loss of the year, and I still think this is one of their worst teams in one of their worst years in Nick Saban's history in Alabama. Now I'm going to get a little bit controversial here because, well, I'm not going to get controversial. Well, actually, I'm going to wait for those two games. I have 4 more games to talk about here. I'm going to talk about Ohio State, Penn State here for just a second. And I'm going to talk about, well, pretty much it was pretty much just the battle of defense throughout this entire game. Ohio State trying to prove that they're